right, well, first of all, I want to say thanks to Pam and Rob and everyone for giving us the opportunity here. This will be just a really brief detour into some abstract. I know there's a lot of topics here that are very specific, and I think a lot of them are very interesting, but this is from planning, so it seems a little more abstract in some ways, but it's the department's long-range plan that we have to update. It's a federal requirement. We have to update it every 6 years or so. So we want to just give you a little bit of background in it, and this is it's a more brief time period here. So we're going to go beyond what the federal requirements are for statewide planning, because we want to look at the future and adapt to the changing needs of our customers. This is going to be a more forward-looking plan than maybe some have been, and it's looking out 20 years. We want to use this plan. It's going to be a guiding document for the entire department as kind of an overarching reference and guide for setting goals and strategies for us. As Rob alluded to, the technology changing faster and faster, and our needs in transportation and the customers are changing. And we also, some of the past plans have been thick documents that have been kind of heavy on policy jargon, and they don't get read very much. They sit on the shelves, seems to be the case. But this is going to be a more topic-based and reader-friendly plan, and a more public-friendly plan, and also more usable for the department as a guide, as I said. And then another main aspect of this is going to be, it's going to be a showcase for DelDot's innovations. So it's a strategy plan, but it's also at the same time showing each other and the public all the innovations that DelDot's doing as we're doing them. And so the plan is organized into two parts. And part one is kind of the background and vision. We looked at all the trends of demographics and economics, transportation, technology, how we got to where we are and where we're going, where are these trends taking us. And we did a lot of public outreach last summer, a lot of the public events, and we collected over 1,100 surveys, and we created a website, which is still kind of in a development stage, but it is out there, plan.deldot.gov. And all these trends and this background information had us arrive at a vision of how DelDot's going to be anticipating the future. We're always trying to anticipate the future, but this is going to really kind of bring it into one big document here, and something we can refer to frequently. Part two is we're calling Achieving the Vision, or the implementation section of the plan, where we're going to be looking at performance measures, both federal and internal. And we want to also look at a concept of corridor planning. We're hoping to develop that as kind of a method of study and implementation for how we want to see some of the major corridors in the state evolve throughout the state. And we're going to have a section that covers 8 specific topics, transportation elements we're calling them. And they are going to, this is where we're reaching out to a lot of people in the department. I'm going to talk about that here in a minute. On the right, you'll see these 8 elements or topics in orange. And some of them are specific transportation modes, but we've kind of broken down responsibilities of DelDot kind of into these 8 areas. And we're going to, for each one of these, we're going to be relaying to the public and just the document for our own reference what divisions or sections in DelDot are relevant to these topics, what changes and trends, needs, and challenges we're facing in each of these areas, and what innovations we're implementing and planning for in the future in each of these topics, and how technology is changing and becoming more prominent. That's going to be a theme in more and more of these areas, and what specific performance measures in each of these areas that we're addressing and how we're meeting our targets. Now on the left, you have these derived from federal requirements, but we've got these planned goals, kind of more of a broad and abstract goals, and wherever it's applicable, these topics are also going to be related to these goals as they're described. Let's see. Oh, yeah. The current status of where we are now is the internal outreach and topic development in this part 2. The specific topics we are, you probably remember last year you all got an internal survey that where we asked a lot of questions about how the challenges you're facing in your work and innovations that you're developing in your work. And I believe we got over 250 responses to that. We're very pleased and want to thank you for everyone who responded to that. And more recently, we sent out questionnaires to division management, asking some of those same things, but a little bit more specific to their division's work. And then those are leading us to these targeted meetings where we're obtaining information and content on these specific topics. And we, with a consultant's help, we're developing these drafts of these topics, and we're going to be having them reviewed by each of the divisions as we're writing them to make sure we're covering them adequately. And in this internal outreach, we're calling it, what we are learning and what we need to be learning are the challenges and constraints faced by DelDot and those that are anticipated in the future. And innovation, of course, is a big theme. Rob already mentioned it. The plan is called Innovation in Motion, and that's a theme throughout, is the innovations to meet current and future challenges, increase efficiency, reduce costs, and especially innovations we want to highlight for the public. I mean, we're all innovating and doing things in our internal process and so forth, but we want to also highlight the big ones that affect the public more directly and what they see, and how technology is changing our work, and what our strategies are for adopting new technology looking forward, and new methods in the future. We want to look at performance measures and how you're meeting them. And our timeline here, we've done most of our background data in part 1 draft, the trends and so forth. That can be updatable, and that's going to be, we're going to revisit that and kind of update that a little bit. And then, but where we are now is, and we've done the public outreach, and then we're at these two red sections kind of overlapping or kind of combined, is that we're gathering information for these 8 transportation topics and developing the implementation plan, which includes the treatment of those 8 topics. And then by fall, we want to have parts 1 and 2 drafted and hopefully completed and adopted by the end of the year. And this is really the last slide. I mentioned before that this is sort of a every 6-year large effort that has been done, and with a sizable budget, but we want to turn this more into sort of an annually updatable, interchangeable parts kind of plan, that as things, as new goals are set or new strategies are developed, new innovations are developed, we can kind of interchange these parts, especially in these particular topics. And people come to us in planning and say we reach out with a survey, and we discover that there's a new method of doing something, or there's an update to a particular topic. We can just replace what's there, and it'll be kind of an evolving plan for the department that way, rather than a big project every several years to come up with a binder that's going to sit so that we can say we did it. But anyway, this is going to be much more user-friendly throughout the department and beyond. And so we like this annual update concept, that every time there's new information, we're going to update it and relay it to the public through the website. It's going to be a lot more interactive. Some videos online perhaps too. If you go to the website now, the secretary does have a video there introducing the plan and what it's all about. And so we want to bring the public into this a lot more thoroughly than has ever been done before, a lot more public input and public view. And that is really the extent of this very quick overview of the status of our long-range plan. Does anyone have any questions about it? I know it's a more abstract topic, and I look forward to getting back into the more specifics that the workshop's about, but this has been a big effort for our section, and it's going to become more of an ongoing, ever-present project that we're working on. So, all right, thank you.
Thanks, thanks, Pam. Good. So everybody got us caught back up. So I'm going to take my boss's lead and take at least 15 minutes extra. So, no, just kidding. So we're working on some new updates to the Delaware Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices. Today, I'm going to talk about what those changes are and where we are in the process. These are the biggest changes, really, since our first revision back in 2012. Also, before I get going too far, I'd like to thank RK&K and Whitman Reckhart, that's our MUTCD team, for helping me put this presentation together. So, if you don't recall, there's a federal manual on uniform traffic control devices, and then there's a Delaware version that is generally consistent, but it's, as usual, like a lot of other things, there's the Delaware way, right? So the Delaware MUTCD is the Delaware way on traffic control devices. The last federal manual was in 2009, and at that time, some of the go-getters at the National Federal Highway Office were scaring the crap out of me by saying they were going to have a new federal manual every 5 years. So that is way out the window. There's been all kinds of various reasons related to high-level things in the federal government from the last administration and then going into this administration, but there is no new federal MUTCD in sight, is the short answer on that. We may get a new federal section on the bike section of the MUTCD, but even that is unknown and unknown when. So when we realized that about a year or so ago, we realized there was a lot of cleanup we needed a fair amount of cleanup needed. At one point, we were waiting for the next federal manual, and we said, we're not going to wait, we're going to forge ahead. So where we are in the process is the MUTCD is a state regulation. The Delaware is a state regulation. So we put our proposed changes that I'm going to talk about today out on what's called the Delaware Register for public comment back in November 2017. We had 46 changes that we had proposed. We had also gone through an internal process where I got a lot of input from a lot of different groups within DelDot, but it officially went out to the public last November. 46 changes, and we received 27 comments from the public. We've reviewed those changes, made the appropriate further modifications. I was hoping that this manual would be final in March 2018. But unfortunately, Annie tells me that the changes we made from November till now are too significant, so we now need to put it out as draft again. So we've submitted all of our paperwork. It should be put out for the public as a second draft now in March 2018. And then my hopefully not too optimistic hope is that we will do a very quick turnaround on whatever final comments we get, and it will be published and final in May 2018. There's two main things we're doing with this update. We're incorporating a lot of interim guidance that we've issued in the last several years. So a lot of this is, like I said, it's cleanup. It's getting a lot of miscellaneous memos incorporated into the manual, so you have it all in one place. And there's some significant effort where we are actually reducing the amount of certain things that we think in the past we've gone a little overkill on. Too many signs, too many RPMs, things like that. So with that, I'm going to get into some of the changes. So with this one, I'd like to dedicate this slide to Shantae and Jim Satterfield, Barry Benton, David Nicole, John Fiore. Do you guys see a theme here? Some of the Eagle haters. Some of the Eagle haters. I'd like to dedicate this to you all. So I'm a big Eagles fan, if you can't tell. So I'm also give a shout out to the world champions. Come on, let's hear a round of applause for the, all right. All right. What's that? Let's do a chant. Give me a chant. E-A-G-L-E-S, Eagles! Woo! All right, we won't sing the whole song, but I do want to say one negative that came out of this, our first world championship here, is that we do have a little lawsuit pending with Jason Kelsey. His little song there, he stole the traffic section's theme song, so we have a little lawsuit going. Sing it in your head. It works. It works. All right, these message boards have nothing to do with what we're doing. Just all right. I'm going to rattle through these pretty quickly. Probably for the changes that we're doing with this version of the MUTCD, we're not going to do a formal training seminar or anything like that. Basically, the slides that'll get put online eventually, right, Pam? Eventually this will all be on the intranet or internet or somewhere out there, right? That's basically, this is going to be the training, but I'm going to really rattle through this quickly. Clearly, you're not going to look at all the details in this, but then the PowerPoint or this presentation, you can go back and reference that for the traffic geeks in the room that really need to get into the details. So I'm going to rattle through these relatively quickly. This change allows for a reduced size on one-way signs that were a little larger than they needed to be. We give some additional guidance on the distance between wrong-way signs and do not enter signs. Here, a couple different signs, based on a request from the secretary, we implemented some "it can wait" plaques on some of our service area signs, and as well as some curve advisory signs, taking some optional signs out of the figures. This was a change we made several years ago, again through a memorandum, where we eliminated the share the road plaque on the bike warning signs. This was one where there was a lot of concern from the bicycling community that they felt the implication of the share the road sign was that it was directing the bicyclist to share the road, when the intent is that all users are to share the road. So after a lot of back and forth there, instead of the share the road sign, we're using the warning sign that's basically saying a bicyclist may be in the lane, usually where you have very little or no shoulder. There's a lot of federal consternation about the type of font that can be used on our large guide signs. Honestly, this is, I don't know of anybody in Delaware that is too upset about this one, but there's some other states that are very upset about the fact that this type of font called Clearview, the federal government has restricted the use of this. It's not allowed anymore. So we're not using it in Delaware anymore. There's plenty of other things that I have issues with, if you've heard me before, with some of the things that the national folks at Federal Highway are doing related to the MUTCD. This is not one of them. I don't think this is that big of a deal personally. There was a lot of standards in our current manual related to agricultural tourism. Basically, we took a lot of those standards out and just have them in a separate guideline document. That just gives us more flexibility if we need to make changes in the future. Pavement markings. I don't know, Jansen, we see any of this out there? Probably. Hopefully not that bad. So back in 2011, when we adopted the 2009 version of the federal MUTCD, we had several typical applications of raised recessed pavement markers. From a federal level, these are not required anywhere, and we said in Delaware we want them in these situations. After some of these projects 2011 manual, it gets rolled out into plans in 2012, 2013, projects done 2014, 15. Obviously it takes some time for things to get implemented in the field. We started seeing some of these on the street and we're like, wow, that's a lot of RPMs. So this is kind of scaling that back a little bit. There's really, I think we went a little overboard on the RPMs. So that was about the only change in the marking section. Traffic signals. Just getting the MUTCD up to date on our current practice with backplates. So the backplate is the black plate that's behind the signal head, and we've also added the yellow retroreflective border around that backplate. So I quiz. It's pretty pathetic. I quiz my kids when I'm driving around as to, how long ago did we design the traffic signal that we drive under. So look, that one has no backplate, so that's like a long time ago. That one has a black one but no yellow, so that was like 3 years ago. And look, there's a brand new one, so it's sad, sorry. Also some clarifying and trying to better integrate traffic signal pedestrian push buttons with the ADA issues related to where the push buttons are, should or shall be located. So some additional guidance in there on the pedestrian push buttons. Several changes in temporary traffic control, Part 6. Some additional guidance on flaggers, not allowed on freeways, except for emergencies. Some changes to detour signs, the U-turn detour sign, pretty self-explanatory. Also, we were having problems. The PED detour sign on the left is the standard federal PED detour sign. We were running into problems there in several different areas where we were, as I think probably all of you know, we do a lot more with pedestrian MOT than we did in the past. So we've been running into problems where we're getting confusion where the motor vehicle drivers are not understanding that the sign for the PED detour is for pedestrians only. So particularly we had a couple cases in Wilmington where we had traffic where the pedestrian detour was, say, to the left, but that was a one-way street. And we had traffic driving down the one-way street because they were misunderstanding the pedestrian detour. So we've gone to a much smaller version of the pedestrian detour sign, which is hopefully almost not noticeable by the driver of the motor vehicle. Additional guidance on rolling roadblocks. Again, that's incorporating interim guidance. Some additional incorporating guidance into the manual regarding removing and installing temporary traffic control devices. This has been pretty long-standing practice in Delaware that we don't do work over live traffic, that you have to, if you're doing work over a lane, you need to close the lane except for an emergency. And a new typical application that we use pretty often, which is closing a turn lane, so just nailing down what the typical is for that turn lane application. All right. I'm going to contend this was not in Delaware, but I can't be sure either, unfortunately. Some slight modifications to how beacons are placed when used on school speed limit signs. Also, a change in how we do overhead school speed limit signs. We thought the previous version, we didn't like the way the previous version worked, so we changed to the new version there. Incorporating some federal guidance that you're allowed to use the school children symbol on the yield or the stop here for pedestrian signs. Normally, I didn't catch this until late in the presentation. Normally in Delaware, we have a yield to pedestrian law, not the stop for pedestrian law. So you would just put the yield sign instead of the stop sign there. A couple changes in the bike area. This was in Delaware. Unfortunately, we caught this kind of late during did you ride this one, Rob? This This goes into Mike Rivera's presentation on how not to do a special event. So we adopted when necessary, and accept bicycle signs. There's certain areas, and later in the day, when you stay tuned for my enthralling bicycle and pedestrian presentation, I'll show you an example of our use of the accept bicycle sign. Again, this is in part 9. We talked about this already from part 2. Several areas within bicycling, we have just gone overboard on signs that really don't do a lot to help either bicyclists or motor vehicle drivers. So we're going to try to really scale back. Really, signing for some of these bicycle issues, it's the signing doesn't really help. It's the striping that helps. And we've spent a lot of money and time and effort thinking about the newest and latest and best design of the striping to best accommodate the bicyclists on the roadway network. And I think we need to keep forging ahead with that. And on the other hand, I think we can scale back on some signs, and the bike lane sign being one of them. In the past, we've had a couple different of yield to right turn bicyclist type of signs, and we've just nailed down that we're just using one of those. And furthermore, we're really not going to use it nearly as much. These, particularly the right turn yield to bike sign, it's just, they're everywhere. They are just total, you don't pay attention to them at all. They mean nothing to the driver. They mean nothing to the bicyclist. So particularly the right turn yield to bike sign, we're going to be using that a lot less moving into the future. Again, on the other hand, we have spent a lot of effort doing research and testing and thinking about and coming up with new and better ways to do striping for bicyclists. So this is just one where you have a situation where you have a shoulder, which would be considered the bicycle facility, and it comes up on an intersection, and there's not enough room for a separate bike lane. So this is old school design where you have just 10 feet for the separate right turn lane. This was actually a pretty huge effort that started, well, there's a long story to it, but it involved the change to state code that allows bicyclists to use a right turn lane but go through the intersection. So again, normally a bicyclist is supposed to follow the same rules of as a motor vehicle driver, but in this situation, the bicyclist is allowed to go in a right turn only lane, but go straight through the intersection. So it started with a change in state code, and then we did a bunch of research with the University of Delaware that resulted in a couple different applications of our shared bicycle / right turn lane marking. So we've had that adopted for a couple years, and again, this is getting it officially into the manual. Something called a bicycle box. This was it's been used in many other several other agencies around the country. FHWA officially allowed the bicycle box sometime in 2017, and we've gotten approval from FHWA to use them where appropriate in Delaware as well. One more pump up for the Eagles, and that's all I have. So thank you. Any questions? Just leave that up there for a while.